Welcome, friends. This is a pretty special presentation by a pretty special person in my life. It's my wife, Chris. So the house behind me is our home in Sebastopol with the dogwood blooming, and it's spring in Northern California. It's a gorgeous time, and spring everywhere too. So Chris Bauman is quite a remarkable person. When I met her 45 years ago, she was a gardener and she was doing plant propagation. And then she's become part of our Bauman College, Bauman Wellness team as a marketing person, a graphic designer, a videographer. But, you know, at her core, she's a naturalist. And Chris loves to be outdoors and loves to be in plants. And really, it's just such a blessing that Chris is with us today. So I'm going to turn the program over to Chris and some gardening tips. We all could use a few gardening tips. Take it away, Chris.
Hey, hello, everybody. I'm very, very happy to be here. I actually am in love with the weather right now and the fact that spring is just bursting. You see it, Arema, she's got the California poppies behind her. And this is the perfect time of year to start your summer garden. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, I did cover in the first, I had one talk before, which was about planning your garden. How do you plan a home garden? What kinds of soil, what kinds of sun do you take into consideration? And what are your needs? So I did talk about that. Then I did in February, I did talk about the envisioning your garden for this year, especially if you live in a place that it has a lot of snow or ice, that kind of thing. And I covered, garden planning, because no matter how young or old your garden is, you're going to be thinking about how you want to improve it. So it could be that you're improving the soil. It could be that you want to plant new varieties of vegetables. It could be that you want to expand your container gardening. And even for people who just have a little tiny window with some light, you can grow herbs. You can grow a lot of different things. So you can go grow bulbs and flowers and that kind of thing. So I covered that, and I covered seeds. So now what we're going to do is we're going to, now it's not advancing at all. Oh, there we are. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually put our fingers in the soil, if you haven't already done it, and we're going to plant our summer garden. And our summer garden is now time to plant warm vegetables. And those are things like tomatoes, cucumbers, beans, squash, melons, peppers. They like warmer weather. They will not do well in cool weather, such as what you get either in March and April, depending on where you live, or in the fall. You want to plant them as things are really warming up. So in May is a good time, but it depends on your weather. And like in California here, we've had a really cold winter, so planting the tomato plants and other kinds of things is now something that you are we're thinking about now, but probably not until May, because it's been so cold. You can grow cool season vegetables right now. You can plant lettuce, things that grow very quickly. Lettuce, cilantro, basil, you can grow those. And you can even plant them around your warm season vegetables so that you actually have the shade of the warm season's vegetables covers somewhat or creates a cool underclimate underneath those plants where you can actually grow some of the more cool season ones. Or you can use a shade cloth so you can have, so someone is if you could mute yourselves, because there's some scratching and it sounds like little gophers coming to. All right.
The garden, honey.
Yes, it's probably
better than your plants.
Yeah, they probably are one by one. All right. So that's our goal for the summer garden. Oops. And so the first thing you want to do is you've already identified the area that you want to plant in. And you possibly have even added compost and other kinds of amendments to your soil earlier on, maybe even in the fall. Or if you have container plants, you can also plant, you can enrich the soil. You can get your containers and put really nice soil in. And what you want to, the first thing you want to do is you want to assess what your soil is like. So if you already have an established garden, you already know. But if you're just starting out, you're just digging your first time, you're going to look at the different kinds of soil, and then you're going to assess what you need to do to make it loamy soil, which is the most desirable soil for plants because it's easy to dig in. It's got rich soil with a lot of, with a lot of nutrition in it. And plants love that kind of soil because they can get their roots down in, and they can, get all the nutrition that is in that soil. But there are there's soil, you're going to encounter different types of soil. So one really common one is clay soil. And that is when you start to dig, you just can't even get the shovel down in very well. And it's a sticky, hard pan with little rocks. You might have to water it first before you even dig. It's not permeable at all to water, which most plants can't grow in or they don't like. Some plants like it, but not vegetable plants. But the amazing thing about clay soils is if you add compost to it, then you will actually have a greater chance of having soil that's very rich in minerals, because clay soil tends to be very rich in minerals. Be right back. So what you want to do is you will want to add a lot of compost to it. And you might have to do it for a little while. But in the end, that clay soil can be very rich and having a great sustenance for your garden in the long run. But in the short run, it's really frustrating having clay soil. Or you might have rocky soil with very little soil, which plants don't like. And so then once again, you have to take out some of the big rocks, and then you have to build the soil. And you build the soil, you might even have to bring some soil in, and also add that compost, because the compost changes the electrical and chemical composition of the soil. It adds more humic acid, the compost does. And so it fixes most problems that you have with soil. Sandy soil is easy to dig in with a lot of sand, but there isn't much soil. So again, adding compost. You don't want to really add regular soil to sandy soil because it will just create cement. You do actually add sand to cement to make cement. Well, you can make cement with your soil if you're not careful. So just adding a lot of compost to it and letting it age a little bit will help a lot. So your aim is to try to get the loamy soil, because it's the rich soil that that ancient rivers over thousands of years, like the Mississippi Delta, put down all this great soil. And that's the loamy soil. That's what they have. And then again, to build the soil, you can dig down 12 inches or more. You can add soil amendments. So you can add the compost. Compost, I don't have time to talk about compost, but it's actually really, you can make your own compost or you can buy it. You want to make sure that it has manure in it, active manure. You can put a bag of worm castings, and worm castings are basically dope for plants. You can add kelp, and you can add other micronutrients depending on your soil. And then you can water it in, and then you're ready. You want to make sure that you can actually just dig your hand down into it and just bring it up and go, yeah, this is loose, and this is full of nutrition for your plants. So are there any questions?
What is NPK?
So many times you will see, so there's macronutrients, just like we take vitamins, and some of the macronutrients that we have are things like, vitamin A or vitamin B. In the soil and for plants, it's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And I'm going to cover this more in depth in the next slide. But that is basically the macronutrients of the soil that every plant needs in order to be healthy. And you will see a lot on fertilizers. You'll see this NKP. You'll see it, and it will tell you how much percentage the fertilizer has. So is there any other questions? Anybody? I
I've got one.
any hands. So I'm sorry, I can't see any hands. So just speak up.
Oh, okay, Chris, I've got one. So I'm really interested in, I believe organic fertilizers must be the best. But a long time ago, I knew this guy who was big into phosphate fertilizers, and and they would sell them all over the world and everything. And I don't know where they were from, and I don't know if they were the real thing. What is your opinion on fertilizers and the types?
So you can get growth by buying chemically based fertilizers. You can put it on your plants and they'll grow a lot, but it doesn't build the soil. So it would be like, we have a microbiome that makes us healthy in our belly, in our intestine. The same way the plants have the soil has its microbiome that is very important to cultivate. And so when you add those commercial fertilizers that are chemically based, they're not based on organic matter or organic constituents. Then what happens is it kills the bacteria in the soil. And so it starts to use up the health of the soil, and then it actually destroys the soil over time, which is why we actually are in a lot of trouble, like here in California and in the Midwest, because they've just been using up the soil. They haven't really been replenishing it. And so it's literally many feet worth of beautiful, rich soil has been used up. So it's a problem. And that's one of the reasons why organic farming is becoming, and regenerative farming is becoming popular.
Thank you.
Any other questions so far? Has anybody had problems with their soil? In their garden,
You suggest people get their soil tested?
you can. So how that works is just what happens is sometimes the plants in the garden will actually show that they have deficiencies. So for instance, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, my lemon tree gets yellow leaves on it. And those yellow leaves can either mean it needs nitrogen, or it can mean that I need to put some sulfur on the soil because and iron, because it can't access the iron in the soil because it's not acidic enough. So if you know that your plant, and you see that there's a deficiency, you can look it up. You can take it into the extension, the agricultural extension offices, or talk to master gardeners or look it up online, and you can see what that deficiency is. And so sometimes you do have to get your soil tested in order to find out if you have something like calcium or something is missing. But most of the time you don't have to do that. But if you do, then all of those resources that I told you about are fabulous resources to learn more from.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I recently, well, within the last year, moved down to Aromas, which is, you know, just east of Watsonville.
Uh-huh.
If you're familiar.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, I thought you would be. And we bought a property that was an equine property for many years, and we are just breaking ground to put a garden in. We did raised beds last spring. I have not gotten the soil tested yet. I've been dragging my feet on that, but I do know that the soil around here is very depleted, and it's there's a lot of clay. So my thought, and I would love to hear your idea, your opinion on this, is for this year to, we have a big lawn area. So for this year only, we're going to till it just to pull up the grass. And then my thought was to get like a truckload of compost and a truckload of topsoil just to get it going this first year.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. I wasn't sure if the topsoil was really necessary, mixing the compost in with the clay, but because it's been, I mean, who knows when this land, if and when it was garden last. So.
Yeah, and you also have to factor in that, you know, maybe, yeah, you have to factor in that, you know, when they grow grass, it does, you know, they use a lot of chemicals to grow the grass. But the compost sometimes, like with lead, compost will actually take, over time, will actually bind with the lead and take it out of action. So there's some lazy gardeners out there, and there's some people who, you know, one method is if you know that you want a place for your garden and you don't want to do it this year, you can actually put compost and fresh manure and leaves and hay and organic matter, and you pile it on high, thick and high, especially in the fall. And then over time, and you have to water it, over time, it will actually soften that clay soil. And so you will actually, you'll go back next year and you'll dig, and it will actually be softer and nicer soil. So that's one way to do it. You have the patience, and it sounds like you do have the patience. You could just pile a whole bunch of manure, compost, organic matter, and some hay on top of it so that it doesn't look ugly. And then you just let it, you know, periodically water it and let it sit until next year, and then see, and it'll be a lot easier for you to deal with.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
I missed the first 5 minutes or so you might have answered this, but does this apply to containers as well? Or do I have to use fertilizer in those because they're a smaller system?
Yes, you have to do both. But there are, and I'm going to go into fertilizers. And so when we get to the fertilizers, I will say, oh, this is a good thing to use in container gardens. But yeah,
Okay.
You have to have pretty good, well-draining soil. And then you also have to fertilize because because the container gardening, you know, it stresses the plant a little bit to be in a container. So you have to be sensitive to the plant and give it some more love and some more good water and some, you know, it's just a little bit different. But yeah, you can grow a lot of things in containers.
Okay,
So
thank you.
I'll answer that question when we do it.
Great, thanks.
So so after you've amended your soil, well, of course, then you're going to get your vegetables. Now you may have grown them from seed, you know, starting in February, which is one thing we talked about, or you're going to go down to the farmer's market or to your you know, your garden supply store, and you're going to buy organic, right? Organic starts. And so, and each of the different vegetables has a different way of cultivating, the best way of cultivating them so that they really produce well and they produce really high quality vegetables, because you want to have that nutrition from the soil go into your vegetables. That's a really huge plus for home gardening, is that you can, if you add seaweed with the micronutrients to your garden soil, you will get those micronutrients. But if most commercial food doesn't have that. So that's the advantage. So I'm going to talk about tomatoes because they're my personal favorite to plant at this time of year, but any others, peppers, the squashes, all of them will have slightly different ways of cultivating it. And how do you find out? You talk to your neighbors, you talk to someone who is a gardener, or you talk to master gardeners. And there's a whole program. You can actually become a master gardener. And there's a whole program, and they will know what works best in your area and give you cultivation tips, when to plant, you know, what do they like? Like carrots are very different from tomatoes. So how do you cultivate carrots so that you have nice juicy carrots at the end? You know, so I'm going to talk about tomatoes in depth, but this applies to any vegetable. So you know what I mean? I don't have the time to you know, to show you everything, but you can always ask me questions, and I can, you know, you can email me or text me or whatever. Okay, so I'm going to play this video and tell me if it's not working or if you can't see it or something like that. But I did this yesterday because I wanted to show you how to plant a tomato in the garden. Okay, so now there's different types of tomatoes. There's determinate versus indeterminate. Determinate is it will stop growing, it gets bushy, and you have to stake it, but in a different way. Then the indeterminate is more like a vine, because actually tomatoes can be vines. So my neighbor up the street, he took strings and he put it up to the top of the tree, so about 10 feet. And he had his tomatoes growing up, and he just trellised them all the way up. Then he got a lot of tomatoes. So you need to know whether it's determinate. If it's indeterminate, you definitely need to stake it and that kind of thing. So here's my video. Fingers crossed that it works, right? So here are 4 different types of tomatoes. This one's called Sebastopol tomato, and I'm excited to grow this particular tomato because it is a beef steak tomato that was developed by somebody here in Sebastopol. And I have no idea if the tomatoes are good or not, but it's a pretty healthy plant. So I'm going to plant that one. I love Cherokee Purple. Cherokee Purple is an heirloom plant. That means that you collect the seed and it stays true. And it's a darker tomato, almost like a black tomato in a way, and it's very, very delicious. So then there's Sun Gold, and it's it's kind of a bigger tomato. It's probably about 3 inches to 4 inches, in probably 3 inches. This is Sun Gold. So Sun Gold is a smaller tomato. It's only about 1 inch big, but it's very, very prolific. It's very sweet. And it's a great tomato to use in sauces, as well as to eat fresh. So I grow this every year. I love it. And then there's this Amish paste. So a paste tomato is a tomato that's smaller and heart-shaped, kind of a smaller tomato that's that people use for sauces. It's very flavorful, but just in certain ways. You don't necessarily slice it up to put it on in a salad or anything like that. It's better if you cook it down in a paste. And this is an Amish one, but you can get also different Italian ones as well. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to plant a tomato. And this is an example of knowing the best way to make for the growing habit of the tomato. But you can do any kind of plant. You just need to know, what their growing habits are, and what is the best way to cultivate them, starting with how you plant them. Notice that this has branches going out of it and up to the very top. And at the very top, it's starting to actually create some flowers. But you're going to pinch those flowers off because you don't want it to put its energy into growing. But notice how there's these little tiny branching leaves coming out. You're going to pinch those off. And in fact, you're going to pinch off all the bottom leaves. You're going to be putting it down in this hole with only these top leaves showing. So I'm going to show you how to do that first. Though what you want to do with a tomato is you want to put some kind of nitrogen source at the bottom of the hole, and the hole needs to be deeper than the plant. So see how it goes down. Okay. So I have worm castings here, which is basically plant dope. But I used to actually use, I actually used to use fish, but now the fish is harder to come by. So I'm putting some of this in the hole. I'm going to cover it with some dirt because I want the plant to, as it's starting to grow, its roots down to hit that nitrogen-rich source of nitrogen-rich source for the plants. Okay, so I'm going to pinch off both this. So you always want to take these off. Even when your plant is growing, you want to take off these side shoots. It's a certain way of pruning tomatoes. I'm also going to take these off. And these are going to be growing roots rather than in the ground. So I usually keep about 4 to 6 leaves here. So you see how long and tall it is? So I take it. You see how the roots are like that? Okay. I'm going to loosen it up, but I'm not hurting the plant. I'm just kind of loosening it so that the roots don't just wrap around and around and around as if it were still in this container. Okay, now I'm going to plant it in here. And I'm going to cover it up with these with this. And what this is going to do is it's going to create some structure for the tomato as it grows, because tomatoes tend to get really leggy. And then I kind of pat it down and make a little well. And then I will water this. And then I will pinch off whatever flowers, these flowers, I'm pinching them off. And I will continue to pinch them off until it starts to grow. And I will also put some kind of a structure to hold it up. Let me put this a little bit more around here. This will give it a lot of structure. Then I will also, when I water this, I will be using a combination of Epsom salts, fish emulsion, and I'll put that in the water, not real strong, but I will water that quite a bit with it. And that will really, really help it to grow strong and fresh. So that's how you plant a tomato. Dun, da, da. Oops. So that's my way of doing it. And you may have a different way of doing it. So does anybody, or do you have a different way that you cultivate your tomatoes? And remember, I can't see your hands, so you can just.
So I have one thing to share. So I haven't grown tomatoes for a long time, but what my dad taught me was he would take the bottom part of the plant, not take the leaves off, and plant it horizontally and then curve it a little bit. And he told me that it would have a much stronger root structure. So he did the same thing that you did, only he thought, I guess the leaves would help. So he used to bury the bottom leaves.
Yeah.
And anyway, they were pretty strong.
Yeah, I actually, I was telling a friend of mine, we were discussing this, and she goes, you just leave the leaves on. So that, yeah, either way is good. And what she's saying is, instead of having it upright, you have the hole and you lean it to the side and put it in, right? But you leave the top leaves, then you bury it, and then you leave the top leaves to then kind of figure out how to grow straight. And so that's another way of making tomatoes have a bigger structure, because what you don't want is it's loaded with tomatoes and then it falls over and breaks or something. You with tomatoes, you have to have you have to create some structure and strength for them. Great, that was really wonderful. Any other tips and tricks?
Yeah, we
I
add,
bet go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say that we add from the feed store, we get a big bag of oyster shell that we feed to our chickens, but we also put it in the bottom of the hole for the tomatoes as well. That's kind of an ongoing long-term source of calcium.
Mm-hmm. Because calcium and magnesium both, just like in the human body, it strengthens the structural integrity of the plant. So that's great. I'm going to try that. Anybody else?
So you bury part of the stem, is that right?
Yes.
Part of the stem that's showing. How much then?
You only leave like 4 leaves. So whether you bury it with the leaves on it, or whether you take snip the leaves off, as I did, and then just bury it deep so that it only has those 4 leaves showing. And I could have buried it even deeper. So
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And also, if you put in a nitrogen source like fresh compost or fresh manure at the bottom, with a little bit of soil over it, it hits it, and then it just goes off like that. So any other things that people want to suggest? There was another person. Did you have something you wanted to say? I can't see who was speaking, so.
Or you can drop questions in the chat, and then I'll read it back to Chris.
Is there anything in the chat? Because I can't
Right
see.
now.
Okay. All right. So we'll go on, but again, feel free to share anything that or even if you have problems like, oh, I plant tomatoes every year and they never produce any tomatoes until October, or it always gets these leaves always curl up and they never do well. And the more I water it, the worse it is. Okay. All right. So watering. So I'm going to show you another one. So here I planted the tomato plant, and then the thing is about watering. It's got It's got a lot of, you have to be careful with water. You have to give the plant enough water. But if you overwater, the plant can actually seem like it doesn't have any water. And then, or you water and I'll show you. I'm going to play this. So here I'm watering the tomato. And you want to water it until it soaks down into where the bottom of the roots are. So it may look like you watered the plant, right? It's all nice and wet, but look how far it soaks down. So you want to make sure that you really water it. Yeah. So that's a common thing that, and you have to know what kind of water requirements plants have. So for instance, tomatoes need regular watering, but not too much, but they need more water than rosemary plants. Rosemary plants are very drought tolerant. Some people do plant tomatoes. They plant them in the earlier on in the year when it's still raining, and then they just let the tomatoes, they mulch them really heavily, and they let the tomatoes become drought tolerant. And that's pretty interesting farming method because the tomatoes are smaller, but they're more flavorful. They're more intense because of now, if you don't water lettuce enough, then it will get bitter. So each of these plants, you have to know what you're doing. Okay. Whoops. So I'm going to talk a little bit about fertilizing, because after your plants start to grow, you're going to be, so you water them really like every day or every other day. And then when they start to grow, then you cut back on the water some. And then you want to periodically fertilize. And what fertilizing means is that you have specific kinds of fertilizer from different things. And I'm going to play this for you, but it comes in powders and liquids and composts and sprays. And so I'll talk about these 4 elements in just a minute. Here's another. Now, in terms of fertilizing your plants, you're going to want to do that. You're going to want to put amendments in the soil before you plant your plants, but then you also, during the time that you are periodically, you want to actually refresh them. So EB Stone is a very good organic company, and it has on here, it has the ingredients lists. So it has blood meal, feather meal, bone meal, manure, bat guano, which is like bat manure, alfalfa meal, kelp meal, and potassium sulfate. And if you don't want to use animal products, there are non-animal products that you can use. You can buy them, all of these separately, but you can see it has nitrogen, phosphate, potassium, calcium, and sulfur. So this is a very good thing to add to your food, but you can buy all of these ingredients separately and put them in your, make your own, which is really fun. This is a liquid fertilizer, kind of has the same kind of thing, except that you, instead of it being a powdery, you actually pour it on the leaves. There's CalMag, which really creates strength in the, and is a micronutrient and creates real strength in the plant. And my favorite is sea kelp, seaweed. Seaweed just makes the plants so happy and strong. And if you have plants that go into shock, you can use Super Thrive. Super Thrive is amazing. It's vitamin B supplement. And it just makes the It just makes the plant come out of its shock, and also it helps it to grow really well. So I always have Super Thrive on hand. So those are your friendly arsenal of nutrition for your plants. Okay. So nitrogen. So I'll briefly go through this. So nitrogen is very important. You will get deficiencies in the plant if you don't have it. It's a growth element in the same way that it is for us. For the plants, it's the same. But for the plant, instead of building muscle, which is what it does for us nutrition-wise, it promotes green leafy growth, and it is the builder of protein in the plant. Phosphorus is essential for energy transformation in the plant. So, the ATP cycle and all of that is very important. So it encourages growth in the flowers, fruiting, and in carbohydrate storage. So like carrots, things like that. So it's a very important element. And you can actually encourage flowers and fruit with it. In fertilizing just with that, you can encourage it. And then potassium is very essential for photosynthesis, which is what creates the energy. And also respiration, water movement, it helps plants with drought stress, which we definitely needed the last couple of years. Increases disease resistance, improves winter hardiness, and improves crop quality. And then there's the micronutrients, the small amounts. It's very important as well. Just the same for us. We all need zinc, including the plants. We all need iron, including the plants. So are there any questions about, you probably want to fertilize like once every, what? Did anybody say anything? Are there any comments in the chat?
Is there a ratio of fertilizer to soil? Is it like, so much, a half a cup to a, liter of, with some measure?
Yeah, you can look it up. You don't want to give plants too much, or else they will burn. It will burn them. Yeah. And you don't want to have fresh new starts, vegetable starts, and fertilize them right away, because it will burn their roots, or if you have too much. So you have to kind of look it up, and you have to, if you have a product like EB Stone, they'll say, 1 cup here and that kind of thing. But it's not exact, but you just have to be careful. But I think every month you fertilize, but some things don't need it as much.
So Chris, how about fertilizing containers?
And thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay. So fertilizing containers, you want to give the plant, you probably want to fertilize the plants every 3 months or so, or every 4 months, but you don't use a lot. And you want to make sure that periodically you actually flush it with water, because some of the fertilizers create salts in the soil, and then it burns the leaves of the plant. So if you start to, especially to notice, like this plant has a little bit of burn, it's starting to get a little bit of crispiness here. It might be that I might have to flush it with water, to kind of flush out those salts. So, but that's the thing about containers. But yeah, you do need to fertilize them. Thank you very much for being my memory. So anything, comments? Does anybody have any wisdom they want to share about fertilizing?
I have a question. So if you're in the ground, because I had asked the container question, is it possible to not use the fertilizer, even though it's organic, and continue to put the worm castings and the compost and manure down?
Yeah. Especially worm castings. I have found that the plants just love worm castings. And I have a worm bin. So it's a series of bins stacked on each other, and I put my food waste in. That's where my food waste, because I tried to make compost like piles, but the rats just loved it. They just loved it. And we have problems with rats sometimes. I mean, you can get in closed containers, but I just went to making worm castings, and I do buy worm castings at the. I do buy them because the worms don't make quite enough. But when I harvest what they have and I make a tea out of it and put it on my plants just go crazy. So that alone is good, and also the compost, if it has enough manure, aged manure in it, is very good. Sometimes you do need to do it if the plants are not responding, but you do, part of what makes the nutrients be absorbable is the bacteria, funguses, and that kind of thing, especially the funguses in the soil. So you're building that soil, and there's different philosophies around all that, but basically, yes, the more that you build your soil, the less you'll need to fertilize. But I find fertilizing is good too.
I have a comment. They're different systems, obviously, and the Western world is trying to make big yields and big profits, right? But in a more natural setting, it's really about cultivating the health of the soil.
Yes.
And also about planting nitrogen fixing plants.
Yes.
Enrich the soil and attract the microorganisms. So I think our focus is, gee, how big's our tomato? But our focus should be really how great's our soil. And knowing that soil enrichment is a forever process, and that some soils are already very rich and some soils are very poor. So if it's a poor soil, it may take several years to cultivate a richer soil. But by doing that, we're really contributing to the long-term health of the planet. And then planting legumes or planting buckwheat or planting cover crops like alfalfa on part of our soil will add nutrient through natural means rather than buying, NPK or, quick grow. So I think there's a balance to the traditional method of really being in balance with soil and appreciating soil and feeling and growing and knowing soil, as well as, wow, I got a tasty, fruit of the soil the first year, because it is time. It's a bit expensive and time consuming to do organic gardening. So you could say, gee, it's cheaper to buy organic food at the store, but it's a whole different experience when you start to grow things. And then, as you alluded to earlier, growing herbs and spices is so wonderful because they're fairly easy. They don't require too much work or even soil amendments.
Or
and then
space.
you go snip, or space. And then you just added some tarragon to your salad and people go, what the heck was that? It's amazing. And so forth. So, there's just different types of plots and, connections that we're having here.
Yeah, and you can do vertical gardening. You can do, I knew this one guy that he did container gardening in a bathtubs in his back, because it was just cement in the backyard. And he's the first person I ever met that had a vertical wall of strawberry plants. And he got strawberries hanging down. I mean, it was really cool. So
Here's a good question in the chat. I'll read to you.
Mhm.
Our tomato leaves have been wilting the last few years.
What has?
Here's the question. Our tomato leaves have been wilting the last few years. Is there a way to help with that? Our drip watering is working fine, so we know it's not that.
Yeah, sometimes tomatoes get, sometimes they get viruses or they get problems where So first thing I would suggest is not to plant your tomatoes this year in the place where you planted
Yeah,
last year.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. So it either could be a watering problem where you're either giving them too much water and then it's causing them they love once a week deep watering, unless it's super hot. They like regular watering. Sometimes you can give them too much or not enough, but sometimes there is, like viruses or root problems that you can get. So don't plant it in the same place and rotate. It's good to rotate your plants from year to year. So you're not building up disease in that area. Which can be kind of hard is if you have a small garden, like I have a small garden plot, and it's hard to rotate because I don't really have a huge big place to change things.
Any suggestions how to deal with neighbors who use pesticides on their lawn?
Oh my God. That's a hard one. Do you know what kind of pesticides?
Well, it's probably Roundup.
Well, Roundup kills things.
No kidding.
It's really
But I
hard.
think it's still about communication.
Yeah,
And
you
meeting
can
your
talk-
neighbors, talking to your neighbors, offering alternatives and suggestions and
Yeah.
informing them of some of the difficulties and the hazards, that goes on.
Yes.
So I'm the person who asked the question, and there's a driveway, separating us on one side, but the neighbor on the other side, the lawns come together. And I've asked them, and one neighbor said, well, I don't use any pesticides. And he showed me what he
My
puts on
money
his
got
lawn,
stolen again.
and
How
it
much?
had,
It's only 70,
Oh, could
but it's okay. 'Cause I
people
got it,
mute?
and then they gave me my $70
Can you mute,
back.
please?
Who's this thief?
Samir. His name's Samir.
Joanna?
Megan, see if you can mute.
I did. I brought. Sorry, go ahead, Cheryl.
so anyway, I couldn't really have that kind of conversation because they didn't really understand. And being a good neighbor is important on my street.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess I was asking more of, we all share the same water table. So at my garden center, they said, well, you could plant herbs because their roots don't go down very deep, and you could do them in a raised bed, in your front yard. But anything, I have plum trees and their roots are probably pretty deep, and my trees are like 15 years old, and I don't seem to suffer any effects from eating that. So I was more curious from the soil perspective, like how does that, I'm assuming it's Roundup, and how far does that go? Like, does it go everywhere? Hard to know. I don't know that much about soil, but I'm learning.
Well, it's probably not Roundup because it would kill the lawn, but it's probably other things to keep the lawn healthy so that it's either fertilizing it and it's also there's certain diseases that lawns can get, and people put stuff on it in order to keep those diseases at bay.
Definitely chemicals, a long list of them, and I look at them as toxins,
Oh, yeah,
and
they're
so
all toxins. Yeah.
So I have a comment. We live in a toxic world. We know that. So really our protection is being strong and nutrient, well supported nutritionally. So it's the same for the plants. So as your plants are supported well nutritionally, they'll be hardy enough to deal with most of what comes at them. The other thing is test the soil and see what comes up and show it to your neighbors. And they go, holy cow.
And test your water.
oh, that's
Yeah,
a good,
so checking water and soil
Yeah.
is a good thing for the community. And if you have, some kind of organic phosphate in there and you go, holy cow, this is like what we're all dealing with, and this is harmful to our well-being. There's nothing like a piece of paper with data on it that gets people's attention.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great idea. Thank you very much. And I really
because
like the
then you can
analogy
do-
with
then you can
plants
really-
being strong.
Yeah, I mean, healthy, that's how we live.
You're
in this
right. That's what
world,
I
too.
do with my body. I try
Yeah.
to be as strong as I can be.
And
I understand that
You're
then.
doing well. And you're doing well.
No,
Thank you.
and it is a problem that we all have. We can move into a house that we don't know, what went on before. but you just have to deal with it as best you can. Raised beds can be more controllable if
Yeah.
you're worried about that kind of thing, but it's not a panacea, you know. If your water has problems, then when you're watering it with that. So it is important to know what's in your water. We have 2.5 million pounds of pesticides dumped on our county every year.
Our county.
The grapes and the apples and all that. 2.5 million pounds of pesticides. So
Yeah.
I think it's almost 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
So let me share with you some of these valuable gardening resources because as you get to know your garden more and more and more, you can learn from everybody and you can learn from different things. So there's backyard gardening that I did with Jean Naughton. This will be in the PDF that if you want to get on it, so you can just click on it. There's the Master Gardeners programs, and they are, if you have any questions, like the question that you just asked about the pesticides and about your neighbors, you can go to the Master Gardeners and they will know.
Jessica Bauman,
Whoops.
FaceTime video.
Uh-oh. Sorry about that. They will know so much. So they are much better than going to the gardening store, because a lot of times the gardening store, they don't know as much as they could or should. This garden with Callie Kim 29 is excellent.
She's really good.
She's really good. She does detailed things. She has videos, tons of them. And I learn from her all the time. I'm sure there's a lot of other people as well, but I like her because she's really down to earth, and she covers a lot of ground, and because there's more every year. I learn more, and I've been doing this for many years, and I'm sure you have too. And then Baker Creek Heirlooms, rareseeds.com is a fantastic place to get heirloom seeds. Heirloom seeds are ones that people cultivated. They don't allow them to cross with any other similar cucumbers or whatever. It comes true every time, and they save the seeds, and some of these seeds have been saved for hundreds of years. And so you can get them and you can try, and they all have different characteristics, different flavors, different, places. They grow well in certain, like maybe along the coast or something like that, or they grow in the northern latitudes. So rareseeds.com is great. And then you can just email me, Christine Bauman, chriscbauman@gmail.com with any questions, and I'll answer to the best of my abilities. Thank you for coming today. It was like really nice. And were there any last questions that people wanted to ask? Well, thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing what your harvest is going to be in the fall.
Yeah. So I want to make a few comments, if I may. Thank you so much, Chris. It's really helpful, and obviously it's a drop in the bucket, or a seed in the garden. But we'll do more of these. So again, let us know if you like it and if you want more. And seasonally, we can continue on with earth-based medicines and healing remedies and stuff. And if you're not already part of the Bauman Wellness community, it's free and it's really non-commercial. Think of it, it's like NPR for wellness. And I'd like to meet and greet you guys more and have you part of our active community. And we want to bring programs to you wherever you are. So if you have a group, whether it's a school group or a church group or business group, or, just a group of people, maybe people suffering with an illness, we're happy to bring wellness programs and share what we have, because we are a nonprofit. And this is the time where we want to be creating community, just like the soil is a community, we're a community, and really expanding that now. So if you go to bowmanwellness.com, you'll see the general, profile of who we are, but we look forward to seeing you and also letting you share this with your friends. We will send out the slide deck and the video show as soon as it's processed. Megan, did you have anything else you wanted to share?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. B. I just dropped in. I just wanted to reiterate that we'll be sending out the recording. And if you wouldn't mind completing a brief survey for us about what you liked about the session, I dropped the link in the chat. And there's also a link here for our lunch and learns going forward if you'd like to join us next time. Hope to see you all then. And thank you so much, Chris. Great
It was
presentation.
great. I loved
Well,
everybody here. Thank you.
all right,
Thank you so
blessings.
much.
Thank you, Chris and Ed.
Yeah,
This was fantastic.
yeah, well, we appreciate being with you. It's really our pleasure.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Yeah. So Megan, stick on the line for a few minutes.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
I wanted to ask Chris a question. I don't know. I just found out about this, but I thought it was super cool. Did you know that the Sebastopol Library is fostering seed exchange, and there's an organization here in town where they train people to harvest organic seeds, and it's an amazing thing, and they have free seeds at the library.
I think Chris is off the call.
It's a new program. Yeah. Anyway, I
Great
thought
to
that was
know.
interesting.
Thanks for
That's good.
sharing. That's
Good to-
awesome.
Yeah, I think it may be an up and coming trend, you know?
Thank you, Ruthann.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye,
It was
guys.
nice
We'll
to
see you
be
soon.
here today.
Yeah.
Bye.